All right, so we are recording. We're going to do events notification, events approvals. So one of the things that everybody should be familiar with is the general approval process. So if I'm on events Darwin Day 2016, they have approvals turned on for this page. If I wanted to publish something, I have to go through an approval, publishing workflow. For any kind of library, that's nice and easy because they do have workflows for library. For lists, so a library is basically anything that contains objects of a file nature. So image files, ASPX page files, a document library, those can all have workflows, no problem. But lists like events, or if you had a FAQ, something where there's no file, it's literally just data, they don't have a publishing approval workflow. So we've got to use an approval process and combine it with alerts. So I'm going to walk through that today. We're going to show it on events because that'll be fairly common. So I'm going to go to the root of the site, and then I'm going to go gear site contents. I can see all the lists and libraries. We're going to go on the events one today. So here's events. And if you were to come to the calendar tab and go to list settings, and look at permissions for this list, you would see that it does not, though it has unique permissions, normally this is not the case. And there are no unique permissions on this page yet. So I will just remove the unique permissions for now. And so now you see, see, it doesn't have unique permissions. So the other thing you'll notice under settings is under versioning, and there's no content approval required for these items. And so we want to change that. We want to say we do want the events to exist, but when somebody goes and adds an event on, it doesn't just go live instantaneously. So that's the default behavior for it to go live instantaneously, and we're going to change that. So the first thing that I do for that is I come to list settings, and I say versioning settings, and I say yes. It requires content approval. I'm also going to say any user who can edit items can see draft items. So if Bob and Ann both have access to this calendar, and Bob puts an event on the calendar, Ann would be able to see it. If you didn't want editors to see it until it was approved, that would be the bottom setting. I found like no use cases for this. There's usually no point in content editors keeping things secret from each other. So you want this middle one. Only users who can edit items can see unapproved stuff. For versions, we're keeping, this is a standard setting. We're keeping the past five versions of events. So if they do change an event, you kind of roll events back. That's true for almost all lists. So this is the only thing we've really changed is require content approval is yes, and then this becomes live, and we say we want it to be any user who can edit items. So now it's told it that people can add events, and it requires approval. If your list, so I just went to list settings for the calendar, and I went to permissions. If this is going to behave the same as the rest of your site, so I have a site-wide contributor named Ann, and she can make pages, but she can't put them live without my permission. If you wanted to keep that going and just say that same person, those same site-wide contributors behave the same way in events, you don't have to do anything. If, however, you wanted to add somebody that was just an event editor, you need a specific group for it. So here we're going to say stop inheriting permissions. We're going to make the permissions on this events library unique. And we're going to say, we're going to grant a permission. And so what we really want to do is add a group. And I want to create a new group. So I thought I could do it through this interface. It does not seem like I can create new groups here, which is silly. So I'm going to open up a new window. I'm going to go to site settings. I'm going to go to people and groups. and I'm going to go to more, and that shows all the groups I have. The first thing I'm going to do is create a new group. The group owner, it should always be site-wide owners. It'll autocomplete here in a second. I use site-wide owners for all group owners. If you really, there's very few situations where that wouldn't be true, and I can cover them independently. We're going to call this events contributors. Standard permissions here. They don't get any special permissions. So this is saying, you know, hey, when I create this group, do you also want to give it any kind of rights on the root site collection? And the answer is no. Because this is specifically an event, a contributors group just for events. So we're going to hit create. It always adds you to groups that you created. So I remove myself from it. And now I've created the group. So now I can say I want to grant permission. I've jumped back over on permissions for events. And just to make sure I show you how I got there, I went to events from site contents, calendar, list settings, permissions for this list. I'm going to grant permissions. Here's where I swear at Firefox. I'm not going to send them an email, and I'm going to give contribute permissions on the events calendar to events contributors. Boom. And now we have a situation where site-wide contributors can contribute to the events. So anybody that can edit pages can also edit events. If that were not the case, so Tim, in this particular instance, should we presume that anybody that can edit pages can also edit events?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay, so site-wide contributors can contribute. Site-wide approvers is going to be the group that we're going to use to approve events. So Tim is like the approver for everything on ISLL at the moment. So there's no reason to make another approvers group. Otherwise, we've got to do a whole bunch of other shenanigans. If he wanted somebody else to approve this group, we would also want to create an events approvers group and give it approvers here. But in the interest of keeping things simple, the standard site-wide approvers group has approve. And there's also an event contributors group that that means that this person can most likely only add events. They're not going to be able to do page content. So they have very restricted rights on the SharePoint site. So now that we've added all that, the list is set up correctly. And do you know who you want to add into this group?
Yeah, our business administrator. So her email is doucette@udel. And she's Kimberly.
Okay, and so this is uncommon for anybody watching this recording. Most of our departments should be using the ArtSignet accounts. There are rare exemptions to that. If a department hasn't been brought over, a lot of the hard sciences haven't, so they're going to be using their Win accounts. For graduate students, any kind of temporary access, we leave them just using their Win account. But for anything that's sort of like reporting to a CETA that reports directly to Rich's chain of commands, those folks should always be using ArtSignet. But again, this is the exception to the rule. We're going to add Kimberly here. We're not going to send her an invitation. That tends to confuse users. One of the things you always want to do when you add somebody to a group is to also add them to site-wide visitors. If I gave her access to just the events contributors group, I would have to give her the URL to get right to this, and she couldn't see the rest of the publish.isll.udel.edu. So an important thing to do is also to add her to site-wide visitors. This gives her nothing other than the ability to view the site, but that can be incredibly important. Otherwise, she will be very restricted needlessly. There we go. Since it's found her once, she'll come up auto-completed faster. And now she can get access. So were she to come to publish.isll.udel.edu, she would have like no edit buttons anywhere. But if she got to the events calendar here, she could go to edit calendar and start hitting add and adding items. The items that she add will not show up on any of the outputs until Tim gets the approval. So the issue that you run into here is that there's literally there's no workflow. So Tim is not going to get an email telling him that new stuff has been approved. So to fill the gap that exists because there are no workflows for lists, even though it says workflow settings, you add an alert. So Tim can add the alert himself, or I can add the alert for him. In this case, I'm going to add the alert for him. As soon as I create this alert, I won't be able to touch it, but he will. So I'm going to say, alert me, set an alert on this list. And it's going to think about it here for a second. If you see working on it for large swaths of time, like that was a couple of seconds, that is unusual. That means the SharePoint servers need to be bounced. Shoot an email to myself and Mihir Chef, and we'll bounce the servers, and that should get back to being nice and snappy. So alert title will be new events. We'll say new events. The users that the alert is for is going to be Tim. Tim, which email account you want this sent to?
Both will bounce to my Exchange account, right?
Yeah, I think so. So I'll use your ArtSignet one. Since this is not a workflow, you could have the alert go to just one email account, but since you're in the approvers group with both of your accounts, either one of them will let you approve. So okay. You're not going to run into this weird issue we ran into before where one account could approve it and the other one couldn't. But you won't get two emails this time. Okay. So say you're going to get an alert called new events sent to you by email. We can't do this even though it's here. So we can't text you when new events are added. The change type will be new items are added. We can also do all changes. So if Kimberly goes in and edits something, it will also come to you for approval. The other thing that we're going to do is say someone else changes an event. We could do if anything changes, but there's generally not a need to. If you go in and add an event, you don't need to be alerted. That would be strange. And then we have three options, depending on what kind of activity you think this is going to be. If she's going to add events like every once in a while, send a notification immediately is probably fine. If she's going to add a lot of events, you probably want either a daily or weekly summary. Do you have an idea of how often? Do you want to be notified every time she adds an event, or just once a day with all of them, all the changes?
Probably once a day, because she'll add them in bunches.
Okay. So we'll send a daily summary. When would you like that daily summary to come to you?
11 a.m. is fine. I can always edit it later if it's.
Yeah, exactly. So you could always change your mind on this one if you say like, let's change it to a weekly summary while I'm on vacation. You can do that.
Okay.
Come here and you say okay, and now the event exists. If I were to go to manage my alerts, I will not see this because it's been assigned to Tim. But if Tim goes to manage my alerts, he will see it. He'll be able to edit it. So I'll run through this again real briefly. The idea is that we've taken the events calendar. We've turned the versioning settings to require approval. We've set it so that everybody can see approved items as long as they have edit access. We've set an alert on the list. And that's really all you need to do to get this done. So do you guys have any questions that you would like in the recording?
That was everything I wanted covered. That's definitely good.
Cool. All right. I'm going to stop the recording.